Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and a doctoral student of psychology. Today, I want to talk about the ages or age range when an avoidant really needs you. And this is not a one size fits all, it's just patterns that I'm seeing. And I think it's important that we can discuss these things together. Okay. The first one is very interesting because I would say it's difficult because it's the most, I guess, stereotypical perspective of avoidance. Like, this is where a lot of them may act the most volatile, but it's not always the case. Okay. Early 20s. Okay. This is why this can be really tricky. Okay. Avoidants often have less walls during this stage of their life, and so they often fall in love quicker or without those walls. And so what happens is they trigger themselves easier during this stage. I don't know if you're following or if that made sense to you. So I'm going to try and clarify, okay? Because they're a little more vulnerable during this time, most people are more vulnerable in the early 20s. And so most people are able to fall in love a little bit easier or they're less guarded. But with avoidance, love can be a trigger because of all those increased emotions, expectations. And so they actually deactivate a lot more. They make more mistakes and they're more sensitive to those overwhelming emotions. But the reason why a lot of avoidants need someone during this time is during this stage, they're often building their identity and your influence is incredibly powerful for them. And so a lot of times that I've worked with couples that have been married for like 20 years, a lot of times the beginning stage of their relationship was really, really challenging because of this. However, they made it work, but oftentimes, especially if I'm seeing them, they still have issues. Not all the time, but they may still have things they're working on. And often what I see is during this early stage, the avoidant individual, they didn't fully accept their attachment issues. It just calmed down a little bit because they're more used to you. And so that can be the tricky part about this stage. However, that's why I think they need you a lot during this stage because it helps them heal. Early 20s or or like 18, 19, 20, 21, that is where avoidants really strongly heal themselves, or even like 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, like that stage. And that's actually when I healed, around that age, when I started healing. And it is because of the relationship I was in, like that really helped. And so this one is kind of personal for me because this is where I really felt like without that situation, without him, I wouldn't have been like, of course, other people as well, but without that motivation, I wouldn't have been able to really heal. Like, it can be throughout the 20s. Like, I think it doesn't have to be as early, right? But it can be throughout the 20s just because this is where a lot of them are still vulnerable and it can really help. Okay. And so that is personal to me, but I've had a lot of, calls with you guys and also patients in my practice that does, have a familiar feeling of this, where this is where they kind of healed. Okay. So a lot of you guys know that we have a group session coming up. And if any of you guys want to join and you want to get your questions asked from me about your relationship dynamics, marriage dynamics, questions that you have in general about mental health or just dynamics that you're kind of curious about, that is pinned in the comments. It is August 9th, I believe. Let me just double check. I always have to double check these things because I forget. August 9th at 11 a.m. my time, Virginia, Florida, DC, New York, Eastern time, correlated to whatever your time is. But if you're not able to join, you guys will get a redacted, blurred out recording of the session. Like, you'll hear me and others, but you won't see their names. Their face will be blurred out. But any questions asked from anybody, I'm going to share the answer in the session. Now, what I'm probably going to do is, obviously, anything you don't want me to share out loud, I won't. You can just you can just mention that in the box. But a lot of the times what I'm going to do in general is I'm going to still take out certain things that I feel is a little too much for other people to hear, but I will still share it enough that you will know it's your question, and then other people will still get some good information out of it. And so anyone that wants to join, go ahead and you can get the seat. It's pinned in the comments. Again, my team will, either me or my admin team, I have a pretty small admin team right now, and I like it that way. It helps me to manage it. But that just means that sometimes people are in different places at different times, right? And so in maybe like 5 business days, you will get that email, typically quicker, either from me or admin. My email will be my name and then like at, and then whatever the website is, and then my team will be info at. So you'll know who sent who, but just keep that in mind. Watch for your email, and I'll see you guys then. The next one is mid to late 30s. Okay. And so this age bracket, avoidants are often very rigid and set in their ways. However, their heart is often closed. Okay. And so they're closed off, and they may react very poorly. They may not react very poorly, but they're a lot more closed off. And so this one, I'll explain that again because I think that I just confused you guys, okay? So in this particular age bracket, I would just say 30s in general. It doesn't even have to be mid to late 30s, but 30s in general. Avoidants are often very rigid and set in their ways. Often their heart is very closed off, but they don't react as reactive as when they were in their 20s. However, they're more slower to commit and they're more careful. However, they show more steady progress. And this is actually the age my significant other was when he healed, right? So, or when he was starting to heal. So that was kind of because we have an age difference. You guys know that. And this is something that I notice about a lot of couples who had a very similar case as us. I was a little bit more reactive, or I would not know. It wasn't reactive actually, because it didn't look reactive, but I was more sensitive to emotions and more uncomfortable with certain things. Obviously, there's a lot of reasons why. Like I had a more extreme version, and I was more uncomfortable with like exploring emotions. I was much more closed off. And for him, he wasn't as closed off. He was actually way more commitment forward and very open. In fact, that he opened up pretty easily with me, but he was just a little bit more rigid with certain things. I was rigid as well, but he was just more set in his ways, and he was also more afraid of certain things because he's older, right? Like I didn't have much life experience in general. So I just, some part of me was just going along with things. He was a lot more concerned about things. Certain things made him feel a certain way that I didn't care about at all, because he had more like background about certain things. And so I see this a lot with avoidance, where they really, in this age, they really do want that. And sometimes they really do want love, but they're really afraid to trust that. Whereas in their 20s, they're not even looking for love. A lot of them are not. It happens, and then they don't know what to do with it. And then you just they're kind of scrambling. And so it looks a little bit more awkward. Whereas in their 30s, they do want it, and they're just very slow, and they have some awareness that this is what's happening, but they are just afraid because a lot of times they navigated a lot of storms by themselves, and they find your presence very refreshing, very comforting, and very safe. And so usually their identity is already established, but their life has become very heavy with professional, financial, and other pressures. And so normally they don't need someone to solve their problems. They need someone to acknowledge their burdens and create a safe space where they feel heard and supported. And so often they really just like a person who can understand them, who is patient with them, and who they feel like familiar with, right? And I remember with my significant other and me, both of us, when we I don't know why it happened so easily, in the sense like right when I met him, I felt like I didn't have to hide any part of myself, and he felt that way too. And he had mentioned like he never felt that like it was so easy to be himself other than with me. And it could be because we both, are avoidant. But I think that maybe it also is just the fact that it was just maybe the stage of his life. And a lot of avoidants have brought that to me. Like a lot of them I've worked with, particularly male avoidants, feel more comforted during this stage. They need that safety. Now, the next stage is very interesting because this one is the one where I see them show more regrets. So late 40s to early 50s, okay? Avoidants tend to like a very steady and slow life during this stage. They're comforted by the person they've been with for a while. And sometimes it's to the point where they are trying to get you back. This is a stage where most of them, even if they haven't wanted to change, sometimes there's a part of them that they want to change. They want to change a lot of things at once, I've noticed. They often reflect during this time. They may carry and express more regrets. They may want to change maladaptive habits. Like, for example, if they have like a drinking problem, this is where they might start kicking that in more. And often during this time, they're comforted by you because they realize that you've always been that person for them. And I'm not saying to wait until this stage if you are younger, but I am saying this is usually when they need you a lot. And the last stage is actually late 60s and 70s and then some, but particularly this time, many are very vulnerable during this stage. They become very open and expressive during this stage, particularly male avoidants. They may actually spend a lot of time with you, like to the point where you might even think the dynamic has switched. Like they're spending almost every single second with you at this point. And for those who are unhealed or unpartnered, they may be very lonely and very afraid. And they often, I'm not trying to like make anybody confused or uncomfortable, but often if you guys have been like divorced, like maybe your ex was an avoidant and they are divorced and you guys got divorced in like your 30s or 40s, often they want to like get remarried to you at this stage. I know that's kind of jarring and weird. Sorry, weird is a mean word. That's not what I meant. I understand that it can be very jarring because I've had cases where with you guys where you're, in this stage of your life and it's very jarring that your ex from like 15 years ago wants to get back with you and get remarried. But it is true that during this stage, they realize how much time they wasted and the only person that they really loved and was open to was you. And so they do want you in their life. And so it's up to you to decide. I just wanted to share this with you because it's interesting. I see patterns with a lot of the cases that I've seen. And, with the ages as well, I see patterns. Like I share things about gender dynamics, different avoidance, but I haven't really shared much about the age differences. And so I felt like today would be a good idea to do that. I hope this video is helpful to somebody. Please like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.